All right, so we're diving into this story about Santiago Martin, the lottery
Yeah.
king,
Yeah.
and his legal battle with the Enforcement Directorate,
The ED.
the ED. It's been making headlines, and it has big implications for anyone who prepping for the UPSC exams.
And especially because it brings up two big things that you need to know for the UPSC syllabus, the ED's powers, and then also like all the stuff around digital privacy in India that's always changing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this case, it's like rips from the headlines.
It really is.
Financial crime, you've got political contributions, and then, how far can the government go to access your data?
Yeah, it's a lot.
All in one case.
It is.
So to help us kind of break all of this down, we've got an expert with us
Hello.
who can untangle all the legal stuff and help us figure out what's important, especially for those of you who are UPSC aspirants.
And particularly those who are going for the mains exam, because, it really brings together Indian polity, governance, and how the legal landscape is changing.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, so before we get into the specifics of this case, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
What is the ED? What do they do?
Okay, so the ED, it's India's financial investigation agency. So they're the ones that look into all the financial crimes.
Yeah.
They operate under the Ministry of Finance, and they're responsible for two main laws. The Foreign Exchange Management Act.
FEMA?
FEMA, that's right, and that's a civil law.
Okay.
And then the Prevention of Money Laundering Act.
PMLA?
PMLA, yes, and that's a criminal law.
Gotcha. So we're talking serious financial offenses here.
Oh, yeah.
So why is the ED always in the news?
Well, because they investigate the biggest financial crimes in the country.
Uh-huh.
So we're talking money laundering, breaking foreign exchange rules, and just general economic offenses.
Okay.
And often these cases involve a lot of money and really powerful people. So that's why it gets so much attention.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so that brings us to Santiago Martin.
Okay.
What happened?
So the ED did searches at 22 different places across 6 states.
Right.
These were all connected to Santiago Martin and his company, Future Gaming.
Okay.
And these raids happened because the Meghalaya police filed a complaint saying that Future Gaming was basically running a monopoly on the lottery business there illegally.
So they were trying to control the whole lottery business.
Yeah, that was the allegation.
In Meghalaya.
Yeah.
Okay, and didn't they find a bunch of cash when they did these raids?
Yes, they did. They seized something like 12.41 crore in cash.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is. And just for context for the UPSC folks out there, when investigators see that much cash that's not accounted for, it's a big red flag that something fishy might be going on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this company, Future Gaming, and it turns out they're not just some random company. They're really involved in politics.
Oh, yeah.
They were giving a lot of money to political parties, weren't they?
They were actually the biggest buyer of electoral bonds.
Really?
Yeah, they bought 1,368 crore worth between 2019 and 2024. And what's crazy is they were donating to everyone.
Okay, so not just one party.
No, across the board.
So which parties are we talking about here?
Well, there's the Trinamool Congress, the DMK, the YSR Congress.
Okay.
And they even gave to the BJP.
The BJP?
Yeah, to the tune of 100 crore.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you've got this powerful agency, the ED, you've got allegations of, shady financial dealings, and then you've got a company that's giving money to all these different political parties. So it was bound to get complicated.
Yeah.
And that's where the Supreme Court comes in.
Exactly. So the Supreme Court, they issued this big order saying that the ED couldn't look at any of the data they got from the devices they took during the raid.
Wait, so they seized all these phones and laptops?
Yeah.
But they can't even see what's on them.
Nope.
Why not?
Well, this is where digital privacy comes in. Santiago Martin and everyone else involved, they basically said that if the ED could just look at all their stuff, it would violate their fundamental rights, their right to privacy. And that's a big deal for UPSC.
Yeah, right, because your phone has everything on it these days.
It does.
But wouldn't that make it harder for the ED to do their job, to investigate these crimes?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Supreme Court, they said that you have to balance the needs of law enforcement with people's constitutional rights.
Okay.
And in this case, they felt that letting the ED just look at all the data without any rules would give the government too much power.
So they're saying, okay, you can take the devices,
Yeah.
but you can't just go through everything without a good reason.
Exactly. And to make that even clearer, they also put a stop to those summons that were issued under the PMLA.
The summons?
Yeah, the ones that said people had to show up so the ED could take their data.
Oh, okay.
So everything's on hold while they figure this whole thing out.
So this could actually change how digital evidence is used in all investigations going forward.
Oh yeah, this is a pretty big deal.
It is.
And the Supreme Court, they even connected this case to other big digital privacy cases,
Like what?
like the Amazon India case and the NewsClick petitions.
So what does that mean?
Well, it means they're thinking about making bigger rules for how all these digital devices are seized.
Wow, this is like a landmark case then.
It could be, yeah.
And it's a big deal for anyone taking the UPSC exams because you need to know how the law is changing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a gold mine for anyone who wants to be in the civil services.
Yeah.
It shows you how the law is being applied to new tech and how the courts are trying to protect people's rights in the digital age.
So I'm curious, what did the ED say about all of this? With them not being able to access all this data.
Well, some of the top officials there, they called the Supreme Court's decision unprecedented,
Uh-huh.
but they also said that it wouldn't stop them from doing their investigations.
Okay, but if they can't see the data on the devices, what else do they have to work with?
They said they've got other evidence that they've collected
Okay.
and that they've already seized properties worth like 622 crore
Whoa.
connected to this case.
Okay.
They also said they're following those CBI guidelines for digital evidence, the ones from 2015.
So they're saying they can still do their job even with these restrictions?
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
But it still raises a lot of questions, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
what about all the data on those devices? Is it really safe?
It's a good question, and a lot of people are worried about it.
Yeah.
Especially with how much data is on those devices and how personal it is.
Yeah, we talked about all that stuff, the personal photos and the medical records and even just your browsing history.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's basically your whole life.
Yeah, and that's exactly what people are worried about.
Mhm.
They're saying if the ED can just look at all of that without any rules, it's like a total invasion of privacy.
Right, and that there needs to be like a very clear process for how they handle this kind of evidence.
Yeah, because what if they're just going through all your stuff and they find something that has nothing to do with the case?
That's the fear, and the petition goes into a lot of detail about what they took.
Like what?
Like 17 mobile phones,
Whoa.
hard drives, pen drives, backups of emails, basically everything.
So they took everything.
Pretty much, and that includes financial records, medical information, business strategies, things that might have nothing to do with the lottery stuff.
Right, and this is important for all of you UPSC aspirants out there.
Yeah.
This is not just some theory in a textbook.
No.
This is real life, and these decisions affect people.
Absolutely. This case shows you how the law is being tested and changed because of new technologies.
Yeah.
And as citizens, we need to know our rights and how to protect them.
Okay, so there's one more thing about this case that I thought was interesting. Future gaming. They're saying that they've actually paid a lot of taxes.
Yeah, they said they paid like 28,205 crore.
In taxes.
Yeah, in GST for running state lotteries. They're trying to say that they're a good company that follows the rules.
Which is kind of weird considering they're being investigated for financial crimes.
It is a little strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, we're good guys. We pay our taxes, so why are you picking on us?
Right. And it makes you wonder if maybe things aren't as squeaky clean as they're trying to make it seem.
Yeah. So before we keep going, let's just pause for a second and think about what we've learned so far.
Okay.
This whole case, it's like a real-life case study, and it brings up so many things that are relevant to the UPSC exam.
It really does.
We've talked about the power of these investigative agencies.
Yeah.
We've talked about fundamental rights,
Uh-huh.
the role of the Supreme Court,
Mm-hmm.
and how technology is changing everything.
All in one case.
And it's a good reminder that the UPSC exam isn't just about memorizing a bunch of stuff.
No, it's not.
It's about understanding how these things actually work in the real world and being able to look at them from different angles.
Exactly. You need to be able to think for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of seeing things from different angles,
Mm-hmm.
we've only just scratched the surface of this case.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot more to talk about.
So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll keep going with this fascinating story. And if you're finding this helpful, please subscribe and like our podcast for more discussions on topics that matter.
Welcome back. So we're talking about the ED and how they're saying they're following those CBI guidelines on digital evidence.
Right, the ones from way back in 2015.
Yeah, exactly.
But are those guidelines really enough these days? I mean, think about how much data we have on our devices now compared to back then. It's like a million times more.
It's true. And that's a really important point because with all that data and how personal it is, people are worried that those 2015 guidelines just aren't strong enough to actually protect our privacy.
Especially with all the stuff we talked about that's on those devices. The personal photos, medical records, even your browsing history.
Yeah, it's like giving someone a window into your entire life.
It is, and that's why this whole Supreme Court thing is so important.
Right. They're basically saying, hold on, those old guidelines might not cut it anymore. We need something better to deal with digital evidence in this day and age.
So could this case actually lead to, like, new guidelines or maybe even new laws about digital evidence and privacy?
It's definitely possible. This whole case has really shown a light on the fact that we need a better legal system for this stuff. And for those of you studying for UPSC, this is super important.
Important how?
Well, imagine you're taking the exam and they ask you to analyze this exact issue.
Yeah.
You have to show that you understand the current laws, but also how they need to change to protect people's privacy in the digital age. It's not just about theory anymore.
Yeah, it's real life stuff.
Exactly.
It's like we're watching the law evolve right in front of us.
We are, and the outcome of this case could have a huge impact on how digital evidence is handled in India going forward.
It really could. Which is super interesting from a legal point of view, but also just for anyone who cares about privacy in our increasingly digital world. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the ED and digital privacy and what the Supreme Court is doing, but let's bring it back to the UPSC exam for a second.
Okay, good idea.
All these things we're talking about, they're directly related to some of the main topics on the syllabus.
Right, especially General Studies Paper 2. That's the one that covers things like governance, the Constitution, and the judiciary.
Right.
So understanding what the ED can and can't do, how fundamental rights and law enforcement work together, the Supreme Court's role in interpreting the Constitution, these are all super important.
And this case is like the perfect real-world example of all of that.
Exactly. You could get asked to analyze the arguments for and against the ED having access to digital data, or to talk about the Supreme Court's decision and how it relates to the right to privacy.
It's like a case study come to life.
It is.
So for those of you listening who are studying for the UPSC, don't just try to memorize all this. Treat this case like a learning opportunity. Really think about what's happening, what the implications are, and how you would answer questions about it on the exam.
That's great advice.
Thanks, Angus. Okay, so we've talked about the ED digital privacy in the Supreme Court. What about this whole thing with future gaming and them saying they pay a lot of taxes?
Right. They said they've paid a ton in GST, over 28,205 crore, from running those state lotteries. It's almost like they're trying to make themselves look good.
Like saying, hey, look at us, we're responsible, we pay our taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
But isn't that kind of ironic? I mean, they're saying they follow the rules, but then they're being investigated for breaking them.
It does seem a little contradictory, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if maybe they're not as honest as they're trying to appear.
It does.
And this brings up something that's really important for UPSC, and that's the whole issue of corporate responsibility and ethics.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
It comes up all the time in the exam, especially in essays and ethics papers.
Like, you could be asked to write about what it means for a company to say they pay a lot of taxes while also being investigated for potentially doing something wrong.
Exactly. It's like a real-life ethical dilemma playing out right in front of us.
And for those of you studying for the UPSC, it's a chance to show that you can think critically about these complex issues.
So when you're looking at this case study, try to go deeper than just the basic facts. Think about the bigger picture, what it means for corporate governance, the role of regulators, and how important it is for businesses to make ethical choices.
Those are all things that UPSC examiners are looking for.
Yeah, they want to see that you can analyze things and apply what, to real-world situations.
Right.
This case, it's like a whole bunch of different things all rolled into one. Financial regulations, investigative powers, digital privacy, corporate responsibility, ethical conduct. It's a lot.
It really is.
It's like a snapshot of all the challenges and complexities that India is dealing with right now.
And for anyone who wants to be a civil servant, understanding these things is super important.
Yeah, you need to know what you're getting into.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something we talked about before. Remember how the Supreme Court said the ED couldn't access the data on those seized devices?
Right, because of privacy concerns?
Exactly. And they even said that this case is connected to other big digital privacy cases.
Like, they might be thinking about making some bigger rules for how digital devices can be seized in general.
Right. So what happens in this case could actually change how these things are done in the future.
Absolutely.
So what does that actually mean? Could we start seeing stronger protections for digital privacy during investigations?
It's definitely possible. The court is basically saying that we need to find a balance between letting law enforcement do their job and protecting people's fundamental rights.
And like we said, this whole area of law and technology is still developing.
It is, so we might see new laws, new guidelines, or even specific legislation to deal with digital evidence and make sure that people's privacy is protected.
This is a really fast-moving area, and what happens in this case could have a big impact for years to come.
It could.
And for those of you studying for UPSC, you need to keep up with all these changes.
Right. You need to understand not just the laws as they are now, but also how they might change in the future.
Because you guys, you're the ones who might be writing those new laws and guidelines someday.
That's true.
So pay close attention to this case. Think about the arguments and what it means for digital privacy in India.
It's a real-world example of how law, technology, and governance are all coming together.
And it's an area where your expertise and your ideas will be super important in shaping a fair and equitable digital future for India.
Okay, so as we finish up this part, let's give our listeners some food for thought.
Okay.
First, how can we make sure that law enforcement has the tools they need to fight financial crime while also making sure that people's privacy is protected?
That's a good one.
Second, what role should technology play in shaping our legal system, and how do we make sure that it's being used ethically and responsibly? And finally, as India becomes more and more digital, how do we find the right balance between encouraging innovation and having the right regulations so that we can create a digital world that's dynamic and inclusive, but also protects everyone's fundamental rights?
Wow, those are some big questions.
They are.
And they're questions that every citizen, especially those who want to be leaders, should be thinking about.
Absolutely.
The answers won't just help you do well on the UPSC exams.
Right. They'll help you become the leaders and change makers that India needs.
So keep learning, keep asking questions, and don't be afraid to speak up and share your ideas.
Knowledge is power. The more you understand about these complicated issues, the better you'll be able to navigate them, find solutions, and make a real difference in the world.
That's a great message to end on. Keep learning, keep questioning, and never underestimate your own voice and the power it has to shape the future.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the Santiago Martin case,
Yeah?
let's kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. I mean, this is just one case.
But the things it brings up, they're relevant everywhere, right?
Absolutely, this whole tension between technology and the law, it's happening all over the world.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how much of our lives is on our phones and computers now.
It really is.
I mean, everything's there. Financial info, medical records, personal chats, browsing history. It's like a whole digital version of you.
It is, and like we saw in the Santiago Martin case, if someone can access all of that without any rules, it's a big problem.
Yeah, you could have all sorts of privacy violations and misuse.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder what would happen if like every investigative agency could just look at all our data.
It's a scary thought.
It is. I mean, the potential for abuse is huge.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge debate right now with legal experts, policymakers, privacy advocates. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, how do we make sure that law enforcement can do their job without basically turning all of our digital lives into an open book?
That's the big question, and there's no easy answer.
No. But this case has definitely brought the issue to light here in India.
For sure, it's a conversation we need to be having.
Absolutely. And for all you UPSC folks out there, this is something you need to understand.
Yes, you need to know all sides of the story, the legal arguments, the potential solutions.
I mean, think about it. You could be the ones writing the new laws, creating those safeguards, arguing these cases in court.
It's true.
The future of digital privacy is kind of in your hands.
It is. You need to think critically, analyze the different viewpoints, and come up with your own informed opinions.
Okay, so to wrap things up today, I want to leave everyone with a challenge.
A challenge.
Yeah, take everything we've talked about today.
About the ED, digital privacy, the Santiago Martin case.
All of it, and think about the bigger picture. Think about the kind of future you want for India.
A future where technology is used for good, where people's rights are respected, and where justice is fair.
Exactly. How do we get there? What role do you want to play in making that happen?
Those are some big questions.
They are, and they're questions that go beyond just the exam.
Right. Every citizen should be asking these questions, especially those who want to be leaders.
The answers will not only help you succeed in the UPSC exams.
They'll help you become the kind of leaders India needs.
Remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
The more you know about these issues, the better you'll be able to deal with them. Find solutions and make a real difference in the world.
That's a great point.
So keep learning. Keep asking questions. Keep pushing yourself to understand more.
And never underestimate the power you have to change things.
Love it. Okay, so that wraps up our deep dive into the ED digital privacy and the Santiago Martin case.
It was a great discussion.
I hope everyone found it useful and that it got you thinking. And for all of you prepping for the UPSC exams,
Yes,
remember, these issues could definitely show up on your test.
they could.
So keep learning, keep researching, and keep expanding your knowledge.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends about it, especially your fellow UPSC buddies.
We're here to help you on your journey to success.
That's right, giving you the insights and analysis you need.
So until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep striving to make a positive impact.
We'll see you then.